General Motors spent millions of dollars developing the C8 Corvette. They hired aerodynamicists, chassis engineers, and some of the sharpest performance minds in the country. And while GM was busy benchmarking Ferraris, a handful of Japanese cars that most Americans have never seen, cars that are literally illegal to own in most US states, were already doing things the C8 still can't. Japan built these things during a specific window in history when their engineers had one job: make it fast, make it forgettable, and make sure nobody finds out. Some of them worked so well the US government stepped in. That's where the 25-year import ban comes from. 10 banned Japanese sleepers, everyone capable of embarrassing a C8. Car number 10, Nissan Pulsar GTIR. Pulsar GTIR was Nissan's Group A rally homologation car from 1990, and unlike a lot of manufacturers who slapped a racing engine into a stock body and called it done, Nissan actually engineered this thing from the ground up for serious competition. The SR20 turbocharged inline-4 producing 227 horsepower was just the starting point. What made the GTIR genuinely dangerous was the Atessa all-wheel drive system underneath it, the same fundamental all-wheel drive architecture that Nissan would later refine and put into the GTR. 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds. In a hatchback smaller than a modern Honda Fit, the GTIR competed directly against the Lancer Evolution and the Impreza WRX in period rally competition, which means it was developed alongside two of the most celebrated performance cars Japan ever produced. It never got the attention those cars did, partly because Nissan quietly moved away from rally competition before the GTIR could build the track record it deserved, and partly because a boxy little hatchback was never going to generate the same poster-on-the-wall enthusiasm as a Skyline. A car with factory GTR DNA, a turbocharged engine that responds extremely well to modifications, an all-wheel drive grip that will embarrass much more expensive machines sitting at used Honda prices because most people have never heard of it. The Corvette crowd definitely hasn't heard of it, which is exactly the point. Car number 9, Honda Prelude SIR Type S. Honda has spent 30 years being underestimated by people who should know better. The Prelude SIR Type S is the single best example of why that's a mistake. The 5th generation Prelude SIR Type S was sold exclusively in Japan from 1996 to 2001. It used the H22A engine, a 2.2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder producing 220 horsepower, redlining at 7,800 revolutions per minute, and breathing through individual throttle body style intake runners that made it rev with an urgency that turbocharged engines genuinely struggle to match. VTEC engaged at around 5,500 revolutions per minute, and the car transformed. Completely different machine above that point. Honda fitted the Prelude SIR with their 4-wheel steering system. At low speeds, the rear wheels turned opposite the fronts to tighten the turning circle. At high speeds, they turned the same direction as the fronts, stabilizing the car during fast lane changes and high-speed cornering. The system was genuinely sophisticated for its era, and it made the Prelude handle with a precision that felt almost unnatural for a front-wheel drive car. 0 to 60 in around 6.5 seconds. Its revvy engine and its chassis balance rather than overpower everything in sight. The Type S trim specifically added a helical limited slip differential, stiffer suspension tuning, and Brembo brakes. Honda wasn't halfway committing here. This was a fully developed performance car hidden inside something your neighbor might drive to work. Finding one in good shape today costs between $10,000 to $20,000 depending on condition and import fees. For a front-wheel drive car, it will cover ground on a technical road faster than its specs suggest is possible. That's a Honda thing, has been since the beginning. Car number 8, Toyota Chaser Tourer V. The Chaser was Toyota's mid-size executive sedan, roomier than a Corolla, understated enough to park outside a hotel without attracting attention. The Tourer V trim took that sensible body and installed the one JZ GTE, a 2.5-liter twin-turbocharged inline-6 making 280 horsepower through an airbag-equipped dashboard and velour seats. 4-door rear-wheel drive sedan, 0 to 60 in around 5.6 seconds stock. But here's the thing that makes the Chaser genuinely important rather than just interesting. The 1JZ engine shares direct lineage with the 2JZ from the Supra. It's shorter, lighter, and in many ways more practical to modify because of its compact dimensions. The aftermarket support that exists for the 2JZ platform transfers almost entirely to the 1JZ, which means a Chaser Tourer V with a bigger turbo, proper fueling, and a tune can put down 400, 500, even 600 horsepower without the engine protesting in any meaningful way. At that power level, in a car this size, with rear-wheel drive, you have something that operates in a completely different category from a stock C8 Corvette. Car number 7, Mazda Eunos Cosmo Twin Turbo. Everything about the Mazda Eunos Cosmo feels like it was designed specifically to make automotive historians uncomfortable. Because when you look at what this car actually was, what it actually did, and how thoroughly the world ignored it, the story doesn't add up. In 1990, Mazda launched the Eunos Cosmo, a grand touring coupe available with a sequential twin turbocharged three-rotor rotary engine. Not 2 rotors, 3. The 20BREW produced around 280 horsepower, weighed less than most inline 4s of comparable output, and delivered its power with the kind of smooth, free-revving character that the rotary engine produces and nothing else really can replicate. Mazda also fitted it with an electronic 4-speed automatic with paddle-style shift control, a full decade before paddle shifters became a mainstream feature on performance cars. The car also came with a built-in GPS navigation system. The navigation used a CD-ROM database and a small display screen integrated into the center console. Other manufacturers were still fitting cassette players as standard equipment. 0 to 60 in around 6 seconds with the 3-rotor setup. That number doesn't tell the full story because rotary power delivery feels fundamentally different from piston power. The acceleration builds with a smoothness that makes the speedometer seem like it's lying until you look at what's around you. Only Japan ever got it. Production ran until 1995 and total numbers were small, which means finding one now requires patience, contacts, and a willingness to pay what the remaining good examples actually cost, typically $25,000 to $45,000 for a clean car. Mazda built the future, sold it quietly in Japan for 5 years, and then moved on. Nobody made a big deal about it at the time. That's somehow the most Mazda thing imaginable. Car number 6, Subaru Alcyone SVX. The SVX is the car that automotive historians keep trying to explain and enthusiasts keep refusing to take seriously, and both groups are making a mistake. Subaru brought in Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the most celebrated automotive designers in history, the man responsible for the original VW Golf, the Lotus Esprit, the De Tomaso Mangusta, among others, and asked him to design their flagship sports coupe for the 1990s. The result was the Alcyone SVX, a wide sculpted coupe with a distinctive split window design, a 3.3-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 producing 230 horsepower, and Subaru's symmetrical all-wheel drive sending power to all 4 corners through a 4-speed automatic. The SVX was actually sold in North America, which disqualifies it from the import ban conversation, but doesn't disqualify it from this list, because the version Subaru sold here was intentionally detuned. The Japanese domestic market got a more aggressive suspension tune, a slightly higher output version of the engine, and a closer gear ratio setup that made the car noticeably sharper than what American buyers received. Subaru quietly gave Japan the better car and sent the rest of the world a slightly softer version, 0 to 60 in around 7 seconds, depending on trim and conditions. The SVX reveals itself as something built around a completely different set of priorities than most sports cars. It's a car about sustained pace rather than explosive acceleration. The flat 6 doesn't surge, it just pulls continuously. The all-wheel drive doesn't react to slip, it prevents it. The SVX is one of the more undervalued Grand Tourers you can find anywhere. Car number 5, Mitsubishi 3000 GTVR4. In 1991, Mitsubishi built what they genuinely believed was going to be the definitive Japanese Grand Tourer of the decade. They were not entirely wrong, they just built it in a way that the market didn't fully appreciate until it was too late. The 3000 GTVR4 was technically spectacular by any standard. Twin turbocharged 3.0-liter V6 producing 320 horsepower, with a rear spoiler and front air dam that adjusted automatically based on speed. This was a car with more technology than most manufacturers were putting in supercars costing 3 times as much. Mitsubishi built it, priced it in the $45,000 to $50,000 range, and waited for the world to respond appropriately. The world mostly shrugged, because the 3000 GTVR4, despite all its engineering, weighed 3,800 pounds. All that technology had a cost, and the cost was mass. The twin-turbo V6 was genuinely strong, but it was pushing significant weight through corners, and the handling reflected that in ways that critics noticed immediately. 0 to 60 in the high 4-second range. The car sat in an uncomfortable middle ground where it was too heavy to be a sharp sports car and not quite luxurious enough to compete with genuine grand tourers from Europe. What changed the conversation was time. 30 years later, the 3000 GTVR4 looks exactly what it was, an extraordinary technical achievement built at a moment when Mitsubishi was throwing everything at the wall and seeing what stuck. The active aero worked, the all-wheel drive system was excellent, the turbocharged V6 responds to modern fuel management and boost upgrades extremely well. The C8 Corvette's 490 horsepower against the VR4's 320 makes this look like a mismatch on paper. The Mitsubishi is doing things the Corvette physically cannot. Car number 4, Toyota MR2 SW20 Turbo. The MR2 SW20 Turbo is one of the most technically pure performance cars Japan ever built. It is also one of the most misunderstood, partly because of its reputation for snap oversteer, partly because the mid-engine layout punished drivers who weren't paying attention, and partly because Toyota never built it in sufficient numbers for the Western market to fully absorb what it was. The SW20 Turbo used a 3SGTE turbocharged inline-4, making 245 horsepower in JDM specification, 20 horsepower more than what American buyers received. Mid-mounted, driving the rear wheels through a 5-speed manual with a gear action that made every shift feel intentional. The car weighed around 2,800 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was in genuine sports car territory, 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds for the JDM Turbo. On a circuit, it competed directly with cars costing significantly more and featuring significantly more cylinders. The handling was rear-biased and communicative in a way that rewarded skilled drivers with an experience that few production cars of any era have matched. Experienced drivers who understood mid-engine dynamics described it as one of the most satisfying cars they'd ever driven. Drivers who expected it to behave like a front-engine car learned expensive lessons. That reputation followed it unfairly. The SW20's tendency toward oversteer wasn't a flaw in the design. It was the design telling you that you were driving beyond its limits, which is exactly what a performance car is supposed to communicate. The issue was that most people experienced it on public roads with no track training, in conditions that exposed the penalty for ignoring the feedback. In the right hands, on the right road, the SW20 Turbo and JDM specification is a car that makes a C8 Corvette driver think very carefully about what performance actually means. Car number 3, Nissan Silvia S15 Spec R. Nissan killed the Silvia in 2002, not because the market didn't want it, because the US market never got the chance to want it. The S15 was Japan only from the beginning, and it remains one of the clearest examples of a manufacturer building something genuinely great and then keeping it exclusively for their home market without adequate explanation. The S15 Spec R used the SR20 turbocharged inline-4 producing 247 horsepower through a 6-speed manual gearbox, the first Silvia to get a 6-speed, and it was worth the wait. Rear-wheel drive, a Torsen limited slip differential from the factory, a chassis that Nissan had been refining across 4 generations of the Silvia, each one incrementally sharper than the last. 0 to 60 in around 5.6 seconds stock. Those numbers don't communicate what driving an S15 Spec R actually feels like, which is a problem that follows this car around constantly. It isn't a car of impressive statistics. It's a car of progressive, communicative, deeply satisfying handling that emerges when you start pushing it on a road that rewards precision over power. The SR20 is one of the most modification-supported engines in Japanese performance car history. Every tuning company with a connection to drift culture has developed parts for this engine, which means the aftermarket depth is enormous. 350, 400, 450 horsepower on the SR20 is documented, proven, and achievable without heroic expense. At that power level, in a car this light with rear-wheel drive and a factory LSD, you have something that operates well outside the C8 Corvette's comfort zone on any technical road. The drift community has known what the S15 is for 20 years. That awareness drove prices upward significantly, and clean Spec R examples now sit in the $30,000 to $55,000 range depending on condition and provenance. The era of finding a cheap one is over, but the era of the S15 being worth what it costs has been here for a while, and it isn't ending. Car number 2, Honda Beat Acti 4-wheel drive Turbo. This one is going to sound like a joke. It isn't. Japan has a K-car class, a government-regulated vehicle category with strict limits on engine displacement, power output, and physical dimensions designed to keep small, affordable cars on the road with reduced tax and insurance burdens. The rules cap engines at 660 cubic centimeters displacement and power at 47 horsepower. Manufacturers are required to build to these limits. Honda decided to optimize those limits with the kind of thoroughness that makes you realize the restrictions themselves are beside the point. The Honda Beat launched in 1991. Mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, 656 cubic centimeters naturally aspirated, 3-cylinder making exactly 63 horsepower at 8,100 revolutions per minute. Honda reportedly exceeded the official cap here, which became something of an open secret. The car weighed 1,540 pounds, 1,940 pounds lighter than a C8 Corvette. The power-to-weight ratio calculated properly at those numbers produces a figure that makes the Beat more comparable to genuine sports cars than anything its engine displacement suggests. 0 to 60 in around 9 seconds, which sounds terrible right up until you understand that the Beat was never about 60 miles per hour. It was about everything between 20 and 50 miles per hour, which is where real roads actually happen. In that range, in corners, on any surface that requires thinking rather than just accelerating, the Beat does things that make larger, more powerful cars look clumsy. It has no weight to manage. It has no mass to transfer. It simply changes direction the moment you ask it to. Serious drivers who have spent time in a Beat, and there are more of them than you'd expect, describe it as one of the most pure driving experiences available at any price. It exposes everything about your technique because there's nothing underneath helping you. No stability control, no power-assisted anything. Just a tiny mid-engine car telling you exactly what it's doing at all times. A stock Beat would not outrun a C8 Corvette, but the Acti 4-wheel drive, Turbo Honda's KE truck variant that extracted a turbocharged version of the same basic platform, produced output figures that pushed the gentleman's agreement boundaries even harder, and modified examples of both have been clocked at numbers that begin to blur the lines. Beat examples in good condition import for $8,000 to $16,000. At that price, nothing else on earth offers the same driving experience. Car number 1, Mazda RX7 Spirit R FD Final Edition. In 2002, Mazda knew the RX-7 was ending. The rotary engine couldn't meet tightening global emission standards without fundamental redesign, and Mazda's board had made the calculation that the investment wasn't justified for a low-volume sports car with an aging customer base. The FD was finished, so Mazda did something that almost no manufacturer does when a beloved model reaches its end. They didn't rush a final edition out the door. They didn't slap a badge on an existing trim and call it a tribute. They built the most complete, most focused, most technically perfect version of the RX-7 they had ever produced, and they made exactly 1,500 of them. The Spirit R came in 3 configurations, Type A, B, and C, with different transmission and weight specifications. The Type A was the definitive version: manual gearbox, Bilstein dampers, upgraded Brembo brakes, a rear helical limited slip differential, and the full weight reduction program applied across the entire car. It weighed 2,756 pounds. The twin turbocharged 13 BREW rotary engine produced around 280 horsepower. The gentleman's agreement ceiling, but the way that power arrived, through a sequential turbo system that kept boost building in a smooth and continuous wave from low revs all the way to the 8,000 RPM limiter, felt unlike anything a piston engine can fully replicate. 0 to 60 in around 5.1 seconds stock. Nürburgring comparisons from the era placed it within seconds of cars costing 2 and 3 times as much. Because the chassis was that good, the weight distribution was that balanced, and the rotary engine's specific power characteristics suited track use in ways that made the car faster than the numbers predicted. On the street, it was more than that. The RX-7 Spirit R communicated with its driver through the steering, through the chassis, through the way weight transferred across all 4 corners with a transparency that made every input feel like a direct conversation. You always knew exactly what the car was doing. You always knew exactly what it needed. That quality, genuine driver feedback is something manufacturers spend decades and billions of dollars trying to engineer into performance cars, and the FD had it from the beginning. The C8 Corvette is faster, more powerful, more technologically sophisticated, better in almost every measurable category. And yet drivers who have owned both cars, and they exist because wealthy enthusiasts collectively consistently describe the Spirit R as the car that stays with them, the one they think about, the one that made them feel something that the Corvette, for all its excellence, didn't quite reach. Spirit R Type A examples now sell for $120,000 to $180,000. Some documented low-mileage examples have crossed $200,000 at auction. Mazda's dealers were struggling to move at retail in 2002 because the market didn't fully understand what it was looking at. Mazda built 1,500 of them. Every one is accounted for. None of them are getting any cheaper.